knowing that spirit was real, knowing that we continued on after death. I started reading the Bible a few times, even as a teenager. So the fascination with spirituality and religion was always there. I tried to go to church twice and spent a few minutes
Just try
there.
it, right?
Pardon?
Just try it. You mean?
Oh, well, I was seeking, I was suffering as a young woman. I was suffering with my mind and my body. I had eating disorders as a young woman. So I was having a hard time mentally and emotionally. So I went to church to try and find some kind of peace or some kind of help. No, that didn't take it. I was there for a few minutes and I was like, nah, this isn't sitting well with me. So that didn't work. So I started reading channeled material in my 20s. So I started reading the Seth material by Jane Roberts. And I found that very, very helpful because it was conveying this idea that we create our own reality and that we are powerful manifestors. But in terms of why Jesus picked me, I honestly think I attempted suicide when I was 17. I was in a very bad way mentally and emotionally. I think Jesus comes to people who need him. I really needed him. And I think because I went so far into suffering and was starting to bring myself out, that when the channeling came, it was sort of halfway through my recovery. And then the teachings brought me to a place of having a peaceful mind. So I've gone from the darkest dark, which is attempting suicide, to this place of peace and love. And so in that sense, I make a good teacher because wherever you are on that spectrum, I've been there. And I understand what it is to suffer. And my main motivation for doing this work when I first started channeling was people don't need to suffer, but they don't know. And that was really my main motivation.
So the raising of your frequency in just one incarnation is just a big step. It's huge. It's because just ASIM, I mean, Course in Miracles, or maybe there are another factors there.
Well, they told me that this channeling was my life's purpose. So when I'm actually going to write my autobiography at some point, and I'm going to get Jesus to commentate through those difficult times. I think that would be really interesting to hear what Jesus and Ananda say about when I was deep in suffering and why I went through that pain. But when I look at my whole life, what I see is that all of the bad things that I went through make me a very, very good counselor. Because if someone's getting divorced, well, I've been divorced twice. If somebody's poor, well, I was poor most of my life. If somebody has body issues or eating disorder, been through that. I've gone through, so many trials.
You can say, I know what are you feeling. I know you're suffering because I suffer. You know what I mean.
Honestly, I think it was a training program. I think I was being trained to understand the human condition so that when I began this work, I would understand where people are and I could help them.
So that was a really hard training. It was many, many years.
Oh, yeah. I came close to not surviving many times. Yeah.
Very difficult. And let's talk about the book, the book I said, Jesus, my autobiography.
Okay.
Because, be honest, I didn't know that a book that touched my life in the way that it did it. I mean, I never ever thought that just a normal book, quote unquote normal book, can change my life in the way that Jesus, my autobiography, did it. So for me, it was really shocking in that time because in that moment, I'm not even was quite sure you was channeling Jesus. But as long as I got the book and I started to read, I said, oh no. I started crying. But I was in the underground here in London. So was really, crying in the underground, trying to to control myself and the people looking at me. Something is up. No, I'm okay. Just something went into my eyes. You know,
it's just Jesus. It's just Jesus.
It's just, I know that is quite stupid now because, but I did that. So I tried to control and yeah, pretending I'm not crying, but I was crying because the book. So, please, can you explain a little bit what that book means for the Catholic people?
For the what?
Catholic people.
Catholic people. Okay, well, when Jesus, so I was channeling my second book, which was called Great Minds Speak to You When Jesus First Came Through. So Great Minds Speak to You is 20 famous people who have passed over. And in 1 month, I channeled these people. And they were all very, very famous people, like the Kennedys and Marilyn Monroe and Michael Jackson. And every morning I channel someone. It was really quite a ride, I have to tell you. It was I didn't know who was coming through each day. And at around the 15th person, I started, they told me there'd be 20 people. So around the 15th or 16th person, I thought, I wonder who the last person is. Elvis, Gandhi. And in my mind, I said, just don't be Jesus. Just don't be Jesus. That's what my mind was saying. Just don't.
You felt maybe. Yeah.
I think I felt him starting to, edge closer. And I was just like, just don't be Jesus. So for 3 or 4 days, that's what I was saying. Like, I'll channel anyone you want, but just don't be Jesus. Well, it turned out the 20th person was Jesus. And he came through and he talked about Jesus-y things, praying for your enemies, being loving. He didn't really say anything revolutionary. He kind of spoke the way you would expect Jesus to speak about things. And so when that was done, I knew the book was done and I felt, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then the next morning he showed up again and he said, I want you to write my autobiography, but first you have to read the New Testament. He said, you need to know what people believe. He said, you need to have a structure in your mind so that I can hang my story on that structure. So I'd never read the New Testament from cover to cover. I certainly never been assigned that project. So I did as I was told, but very interesting thing happened. I got quite frightened that Jesus was asking me to do this. And he basically asked me to take, 24 hours to consider whether or not I would do it. And in that 24 hours, I had a fear of the Catholic Church arise in my mind. Now, I'm not Catholic. I've never been to Catholic Church. I thought that was really interesting that a fear of the Catholic Church came up in that 24 hours. And I thought, this is the kind of thing that people get put away for doing. They get killed for doing it, or they get put in a mental asylum or something. And then Tina's kind of spunky attitude came through, and I said, well, I never wanted a boring life anyway. I'm going for it. But it was very interesting that a fear of the Catholic Church came up. So what I realized in my experience there was that the church has made it very, very clear not to interfere in these kinds of things. And what Jesus said at the beginning of this book is that your world cannot heal itself until you understand who I truly was. And I'm writing this book so that you get the truth of who I was, not the church's version, not the Christian church's version, not the Catholic church's, but my version. And he said, basically, I'm reclaiming my name because so much has been done in my name that is wrong. That is wrong. And so and what are you going to say if Jesus offers you a job like that? No. And I was like, okay. But it was a huge psychological journey. And several times during the book, I stopped because it was overwhelming emotionally and intimidating. I wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing. They're like, oh, what are you up to? And I'm like, oh, nothing, painting houses. I was a house painter.
Yeah.
And at one point, I actually had put the book aside. It was on my computer. I was like, I can't do this. And I had gone back to house painting, and I fell down an 18-foot ladder and broke my foot, and ended up being crippled for 6 months and sitting in front of my computer in a wheelchair, unable to do anything except finish the book. So
the thing is, that is one of my questions, because you tell that story in Love and Map and another book, that book. You tell that story, you say that, and you describe a phrase there. I said, not even channeling Jesus can I say, not even channeling Jesus can protect me from my own frequency.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time I was translating 40 Days of 49.
Yeah.
I was, some difficult time with my ego. So I was in that situation. And when I was reading, I remember when I was reading that book, say, oh, not even Jesus can protect me from my own frequency. So it's your job. It's my job.